on first.
Okay. The award-winning Cinema Classics is produced by John DeSando and Johnny DiLoretto. Listen to the shows and read reviews online at WCBE.org.
Cinema Classics is brought to you by the Gateway Film Center, 1550 North High Street, Columbus, Ohio. Further details and showtimes online at gatewayfilmcenter.org. And don't forget us on Facebook.
Yeah, go over there and like us. Did I kill you? It takes 2 seconds. You're probably on Facebook already.
I'm John DeSando.
And I'm Johnny DiLoretto. This is Cinema Classics. We're at WCBE today.
That's right. We don't have our sign.
Yeah, I know, but we have your little, your iPad and your little image up there.
Right.
So very cool.
I thought
Yeah.
murder was against the law.
Well,
That's what Farley Granger says to Robert Walker in Strangers on a Train.
yeah. What a great little movie. So Strangers on a Train is our Cinema Classics film this month at Gateway Film
That's
Center.
on Sunday the 4th.
On October 4th at 2 p.m. It's all part of Gateway Film Center's annual Hitchcocktober celebration.
Gosh.
This year, I think, John, it's the 5th year
Yeah.
of Hitchcock films through the month of October at the Film Center. This year, more Hitchcock films than ever before.
Wow.
Used to just do 4.
Yeah.
This year, we're doing 13.
Well, and it took a 3-hour class to prepare people.
Yes, that's right.
We gave that class, so
We
it's,
did.
it's ready to go.
It's a little primer on Hitch.
Well, you know, the Strangers on a Train, I particularly like, and I know we're going to talk about a few more of those.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to just suggest that there's so much going on here.
Oh my God!
It's
Yeah.
even suggested by the music.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the one loose tennis player played by Farley Granger, and you get your slow music. This is Dmitri Tiomkin.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you've got your grating music with Robert Walker,
Uh-huh.
as Walker plies Granger to do a reverse murdering.
Right.
And-
Crisscross.
Yeah, the crisscross. You know, and it's great stuff. And then throughout, you have this constant struggle in Farley Granger's mind, because he's really a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
But whether in fact he wouldn't like to off his wife
Yeah.
so that he could have his affair or marry. That's
Right.
what they do in those days.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
actually marry. Ruth Roman, is it?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And who was the daughter of the senator, played by Leo G. Carroll.
Mhm.
Anyway, there's so many relationships going on here, and particularly, and it just my real note on this is you're talking about divorce and about people finding the right partner.
Yeah.
And Hitch has got this stuff going on all the time. And this is 60 years ago.
Yeah. And you know, you mentioned jokingly before we started recording about this not so subtle homosexual
Oh, yeah.
sub plot that's going
Yeah.
on there, or the tensions rather. And you know, this was great 50, 60 years ago that Hitchcock was doing this, because that tension was certainly there for audiences. They certainly picked up on it. They might not have wanted to give voice to it or recognize it overtly as such,
Right.
but that certainly had to play a role in how audiences responded to Hitchcock's movies, even when it wasn't necessarily that, but it was a sexual tension.
Yes.
He was constantly playing with sexual tension, knowingly so, and that really fuels this movie. Robert Walker's performance is unnerving. He is an unnerving guy. Like, I don't think I've ever seen a character quite like.
He is so seductive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he gets this pretty much straight guy to consider murder.
Yeah.
And it's truly amazing. And there are some very fine scenes, including the carousel scene.
Yeah, the tour de force work on that scene is amazing. Hitchcock takes a classic Hitchcock to take a location that we associate with, you know, really good familial feelings, nostalgic feelings of youth, and to turn it into this sort of predatory playground where, you know, this murder takes place.
Somebody was saying, somebody on the set was seeing Hitchcock walking around the set, just kind of droopy, walking around, and asked him what was the problem. And Hitchcock said to him, "I'm bored." And bored because he had every shot detailed before the film,
Yeah.
so that when he got there, any idiot could have photographed it.
So this is an interesting thing about Strangers on a Train. I was while preparing for our course at the Film Center, I was looking at that book. It's classic Hitchcock Truffaut book.
Yes.
You know, where Truffaut is just interviewing Hitchcock
Yeah,
about his movie.
50 hours.
Yeah, and it's a really fascinating read. And I mean, you have two filmmakers who are just, you know, Hitch is wide open to the conversation and divulging everything to Truffaut. And it's interesting to me, he said something about Strangers on a Train. He kind of dismissed it. And he said, you know, that movie would have been better. It could have been better. And Truffaut was like, well, how could it have been better? And he said, well, I think the lead actors were weak. And, you know, had I cast some stronger actors in the parts, maybe the film, I would remember it more fondly. And I was shocked that he said that, one, openly. This was probably the late 60s, early 70s he was saying that. I'm sure Robert Walker and Farley Granger were still around.
Oh, yeah. Well, he wanted William Holden
Oh, did he?
for the Farley Granger part.
Interesting.
Yeah, so you
That would that would have been really. But William Holden would never have been seducted by Robert Walker.
No, he doesn't have.
Seduced.
Well,
Sorry.
and Holden doesn't have that face side that I think Farley Granger does that works so well.
Right, exactly. Which is why he was cast also in Rope.
Oh, right, that's right, good one. Yeah.
But yeah, I just thought that was interesting because when I look at this movie, I think it's nearly perfect in its the casting, the tensions, how those the actors' individual physicalities work off of each other, given the psychological stuff that's going on between them. You know, Farley Granger is sort of like, he looks like a little weak tennis player guy.
Sure,
like
yeah.
you know, like
a pretty boy.
a pretty boy, just ineffectual and easily, you know, easily manipulated. And Robert Walker is this little bulldog of a sociopath, you know. And those two, that concoction is really, I think, great in this movie.
Well, you know, working with Hitch is sometimes stressful, and a couple of months after this film, Robert Walker died.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
so then
so-
he wasn't around to hear that Hitchcock
He wouldn't
wasn't
have been
pleased
around,
with his
right.
performance. He died after this?
Yeah, a couple of months after this.
Really?
I don't know what, but just curious to me.
That is curious.
Yeah.
In fact, it's downright mysterious. It might even be the plot of a Hitchcock film.
You know, what other ones in our Hitchcocktober are
Wow.
you thinking about?
I mean, there's so many, you know, every year the Film Center has shown variations of, you know, Rear Window, Vertigo, Psycho, Dial M for Murder, maybe. There's always one.
Birds.
North by Northwest, The Birds.
Right.
This year, there's all. I'm really excited about the fact that we're going to see Strangers on a Train as part of the
Right.
program, The Wrong Man,
Yep.
Henry Fonda, Suspicion,
Okay.
Notorious,
Yep.
To Catch a Thief, North by Northwest. In fact, all the Cary Grant Hitchcock movies will be represented this
Right.
month.
Yeah. I think it was Grant who visited the set, maybe, of The Birds. He visited one of those sets and said to one of the blondes,
Yeah.
you know, you're a very strong woman because I'm working with Hitch. Because, you know, one of the things that's going to be interesting, and I think we'll probably we certainly in our course would mention his fixation with his blondes, of which there are at least 4 of them,
Yeah.
and the torture that he put Tippi Hedren through
Sure.
for The Birds, and which in fact he foreshortened her career because he would not let her out of the contract, and she was, you know, property people wanted,
Yeah.
and he wouldn't let her out, and actually she claims to this day that he stopped cold her career. So he was a tough guy, but he really probably didn't enjoy himself unless he had a blonde to poke at.
Interesting.
Except maybe for Grace Kelly. I'm not sure he tortured her.
Yeah, I wonder how that worked.
Yeah, no, I think it was pretty good for that.
So here's an interesting anecdote about Spielberg and Hitchcock. Spielberg, and you can see it in all his films, is in love with that classical style that Hitchcock was such a master of. In the mid-70s, Hitchcock had just directed his last film, Frenzy,
Okay.
and then went into retirement. Spielberg had just directed Jaws and was now on top of the world, and now in a position where he could meet his idol, Alfred Hitchcock. So he kept doggedly trying to set up an appointment or a meeting with Hitch, who refused every offer to meet with Spielberg. No one knew why. No one knew why. He would just he just had no interest in meeting this young this young filmmaker. Eventually, Bruce Dern, who worked with Hitchcock on Frenzy, I think, asked him, "Hey, why don't you meet this kid?" And Hitchcock said, "Is he the one that directed the Fish picture?" And Bruce Dern was like, "Yeah." He goes, I don't want to meet that boy. I don't have anything to say to him." And so Dern pressed him and said, "Seriously, why won't you meet this guy? He just wants to sit with you for 5 minutes and tell you how much he thinks of your work." And Hitchcock said, "Well, he makes me feel like a prostitute." And Dern said, "I don't understand why." And he said, "Well, they hired me to do some voiceover work for an amusement park ride based on that movie that he made." And he said, "And I just feel like such a whore for selling myself out that I can't bear to even shake the guy's hand."
Gosh, Hitchcock is so complicated.
In his head, man. Right? Which is why that whatever machinations psychologically that he was going through to avoid meeting this guy, that is sort of what's so great about the inner workings of his films.
I love it because he is so different from his physical appearance.
Mm-hmm.
That portly, nebbish kind of guy has underneath him what was, I think, DeCinema had labeled him as the master of suspense.
Yeah.
And it strikes me that he is so controlled, and really, as you were talking about, in that classical way, he even bookends Strangers in a Train. Because if you remember, Robert Walker says, "I beg your pardon, but aren't you Guy Haynes?" He says that on the train to Charlie Granger. And then at the end, the minister says to Granger and Miriam, "I beg your pardon, aren't you Guy Haynes?" And the two of them just walk away.
Yeah.
So that's Hitchcock.
Yeah, that's Hitch, the master of suspense. Hitchcocktober at Gateway Film Center. Don't miss it.